Good afternoon, students. Here back with another session with Denmark. You feel me? We are still moving and operating in creative nonfiction. And actually, today I have a very special guest, one of my colleagues here with me. I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Hey y'all! My name is Miss Stewart, and I am also a ninth grade ELA teacher. And I'm happy to be here to assist Dr. Denmark on today's lesson.
All right. We are collaborating in bringing you the 1619 project. I would say it is the um, children's friendly version of the story, and we're gonna kind of be looking at the novel as a whole. I shouldn't say novel, but I'll introduce that later. But Born on the Water is a is a picture book version of the 1619 project. It's actually a presentation of an argument about the history of African American people in this country. And of course, we're also on our self identity unit, and this book is part of what I'm going to use to represent me. And eventually, you'll be finding your own book to represent you. So I'm using it kind of like double sided to show you or represent my own self identity, and also to kind of show you the argument side of creative nonfiction. All right, so that's very important to remember. Ms. Stewart is going to give us a brief overview of the story, of this a very short overview of the story as a whole. Go ahead.
Okay, so the story is about a little girl who has an assignment in school, and the assignment is for her to come up with a flag that like represents her family's heritage. But she is an African American student, and she feels like her heritage has been lost. Like she's unaware of like how she got to this country, and so she goes home and she's upset and she's embarrassed for not knowing, and she asks her grandma to tell her the story of her family's like background. And so her grandma goes over and tells her like all of the strides, both big and small, that her ancestors have made for her to be afforded like different privileges that she now has here in America, and how they contributed to like founding and building America. So by the end of the story, she's proud of where she came from, and she's able to draw the American flag and say that her family helped build America, and that she feels responsible to continue making America a better country.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's very great. All right. Back it up. All right. But anyway, so this is. I want you to understand that this book, this picture book, is a product of a larger work called the 1619 Project, which is an argument for a retelling, a reconstructing of the tale that is the journey that African American people have made from Africa, being in the transatlantic slave trade to America, and their contributions, their their struggles, their strides, as Miss Stewart indicated. Now, what I want you to do is pay very close attention to. That's what makes this the creative nonfiction version. Now, if you were to read the actual 1619 project, you will see that it's a larger work that is more reads more like history, but this does not. So what we want to do is kind of go through and we want to pull out those pieces, small pieces here and there, that are extremely creative and is a creative way of bringing a story to a younger audience. I want you to kind of remember that, keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, class. Keep in mind two things. I'm going to be presenting these things to you in this way. Keep in mind, not only is this a creative way of presenting an argument, remember at its essence, at its core, it is an argument. So I want to show you those elements, and I'm going to start right here where it says, what grandma tells me. Remember, the background story is this young lady is looking to understand better the history of her family and her ancestors. It says, they say our people were born on the water. Now, I want you to notice automatically it says they say, but our people had a home place, a land before they were sold. 400 years ago in 1619, our ancestors were taken and brought here on a ship called the White Lion a whole year before the Mayflower arrived. But before that dreadful voyage, there was a time when they did not pray for freedom. There was a time when they did not sing about overcoming. Their story does not begin with whips and chains. They had a home, they had a place, a land, and a beginning. Their story is our story. Before they were enslaved, they were free. All right. What I've done on the screen on with red underline is I've highlighted some places where it's kind of like, if you will, a double meaning. So the double meaning, or I should say a double purpose, a double function. One, what I'm highlighting is the use of repetition. That is also um, a device of poetic purpose, as well as uh, this part of the text that has poetic purpose also has argumentative purpose. So let's look at them all, everything I've highlighted. So I said had a home, a place, a land before they were sold. Their story is repeated, and it says here again you see they had a home, a place, a land, and a beginning. All right. So when it says they had, this is the argumentative part, but I want to first talk about the all right. Usually when we're looking at repetition has a significant purpose of emphasizing specific ideas. Just reiterating, placing those ideas in front of you, leaving you just like your favorite song, those lyrics kind of linger in your head because they become repetitious. For example, some money long. What she say? Hers, mine, ours. We can do this ours. Those lyrics stick in my head, even though I do hate the song. Those lyrics stick in my head because they are repetitive, just like you see this repetition in this excerpt. So that is the poetic purpose. So let's look at the argumentative purpose. It says they had a home, and it starts off in the beginning here. It says they say. All right. So remember, she's arguing for a different telling of a story about the history of African American people. So they didn't just show up in water or in the water. They had a place before that. They had a home, they had a place, they had land before they were sold. The narrative does not start with their travel from Africa to America. The narrative of the history of African American people actually starts in very, very vital places in Africa where they had very industrialized, if you would, civilized places. So here's this a double meaning with the argument of where the story actually starts, and also you have the idea of poetic purpose. This repetition that kind of gets these ideas to be driven into your mind, into your psyche, and into your understanding. All right, here's another portion of the story, and I want to kind of highlight something very specific, but let me read from the beginning. We've made our way from the homes and from the settlements, the civilization that is Africa, and we've made our way onto the boat that is specifically identified in this story as a white lion. All right, so it says some could not bear the pain. They refused to eat. They shut their mouths until their hearts gave out. Others tossed themselves into the teal in eternity of the Atlantic Ocean, swimming one last time with the ancestors. Sickness and hunger, filth and cruelty took the others, almost half. But those who did not die resolved to live no matter what. Packed in dark misery, strangers chained together head to feet, hip to hip, in the bottom of a ship called the White Lion. They saw that these strangers, men, women, children, kidnapped too from many villages, these were their people now. These many people became one people, a new people. And it ends like this. And that is why the people say, we were born on the water. We come from the people who refuse to die. All right. The idea of being born on the water is quite poetic in its own right. When we see the repetition of the word, I don't want to get too graphic about understanding how the different elements of poetry, but we do see some credible things. You see the italicized words. So you see that this does capture a very poetic idea of people who refuse to die. And that is, I want to be clear that that's a literal idea of they saw some very treacherous and very demonic, I would say some very evil and villainous things, heinous things, but they refused to give up their lives. and that speaks not only for the freedom of the people. All right. So listening to the line "We were born on the water" is taking out the literal understanding or the literal meaning of being born on water. This does not have more of a literal, but more of a figurative purpose in the poetic stance. It is poetry because it does not literally mean that these people were born on water. She's talking about or speaking of a rebirth of a people who had to re-understand or repurpose themselves, repurpose their lives, and connect themselves with people who were complete strangers, but who had traveled or will be traveling and journeying in the same ambiguous lives that they would eventually have to carry. So that's the poetic side. So let's look at the argument side. What argument is being made here? So she's one arguing, continuing the argument that these people weren't necessarily born on the water. She's continuing that argument, but she's also given a repurposing of the statement, saying the original statement being that people were born on the water means that the beginning of the story of African American people started in the water in the transatlantic slave trade. That's where their stories begin. She says that's not where they were born. However, she repurposes the term "born on the water" because this birth she's referring to is a birth of a new people connecting themselves to the other people who were strangers, who were also African, who were taking this journey to the new Americas. So that is a repurposing and giving a brand new meaning to the entire argument about where does that story start. No, the story doesn't start with that birth on the water. It starts with a rebirth, if you will, on the water. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward.